Hey, what's going on, folks? We have a great show for you today. Did they raid former President Donald Trump because he had classified documents? Seems like new reports are coming out, providing a possible reason as to why the raid happened in the first place. I'm going to read that aloud in a second, and I have lawyer Mike Yoder joining me today to go over what he thinks of it and the legal side of all of this stuff. It's going to be a great stream. Also, they apparently seized and confiscated the cell phone of Rep. Scott Perry. We're going to talk about that as well. And while left-wingers are saying that Trump deserves this because they think he's a criminal, a lot of right-wingers feel like this is political persecution and Trump's getting a raw deal, which reminds me of when Trump was in office, Chuck Schumer on Rachel Maddow saying this.
This antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about.
That was a wild moment. What do you think? We're about to start the podcast with lawyer Mike Yoder right now. Welcome to the show.
It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. Yeah.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today I have a special guest joining me live. It's lawyer Mike Yoder, who I know has done a lot of great work with medical tyranny. If you want to intro yourself and tell people like what you do, appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Actually, we linked up a few months ago back at a couple conferences, and we've just stayed in touch. And definitely love the work that you're doing. Likewise, I've been involved in lawsuits. Essentially, I told Joe Biden I was going to sue the shit out of him 9 minutes after he said he was going to mandate vaccines for everyone. So I did, and now it's 8, 9 months later, 10 months now, and I'm still suing him. So right now, mainly just focusing on protecting everyone's rights because they're just being eviscerated for they're just being falling victim to tyranny.
Right, and I have a good question from Patreon too, because I asked my Patreon supporters and just like questions about the medical tyranny they have. I'll save it till the end, and I'm just going to read a few news reports before we start, and I want to get your take because I've said a lot already about yesterday. So Fox News reported last night that Republican Representative Scott Perry had the FBI confiscate his cell phone. He said he was traveling with his family and he was approached by FBI agents who handed him a warrant and requested that he turned over his cell phone. He said, I quote, "This morning while traveling with my family, 3 FBI agents visited me and seized my cell phone. They made no attempt to contact my lawyer, who would have made arrangements for them to have my phone if that was their wish. I'm outraged, though not surprised, that the FBI, under the direction of Merrick Garland's DOJ, would seize the phone of a sitting member of Congress," Perry said in his statement. "My phone contains info about my legislative and political activities and personal private discussions with my wife, family, constituents, and friends. None of this is the government's business." So before I get to the next story, what's the legality of, can the FBI just do whatever they want? And, what rights do you have, I guess, as a congressman or a citizen?
Well, the biggest thing, and it doesn't matter whether you're a congressman, you're in the military, you're homeless, you're working middle class, you're an elitist within society. The bottom line is that the constitutional rights that you're afforded as a citizen don't just disappear because of a new administration taking over the White House or a different agenda or whatever basis they want to assert. The problem with understanding the search warrant issue goes back to a bigger problem, which is so many Americans don't even know what their rights are. We keep talking about enforcing your rights and stand up for yourself, but at the end of the day, it's like telling someone how to build a house and they never picked up a hammer. People don't even know what their rights are. They don't have the tools or they're not equipped because it's just knowledge based. But in terms of what their rights are against this Fourth Amendment search and seizure issue, in order for the federal government, the same thing would apply for a state, but in order for a federal government, such as the FBI, an agency to seize your property, to search it, whether it be physically search a home or seize something, they need to get a search warrant, which requires a magistrate judge in the federal government, meaning that there's 2 different levels of non-appellate judges. You have district court and you have the magistrates. Magistrate judges oftentimes are the ones that issue the search warrants, where they have a showing of probable cause that gets sworn to on an affidavit, and then the judge determines if there's enough probable cause to issue that warrant, then they would go and execute the search. Again, this is oftentimes, if not always, prior to someone ever being charged with a crime.
Right.
So if you sign an affidavit swearing under oath that the facts and the evidence that you're presenting to this judge are true, and it rises to that level of probable cause, then the judge signs the warrant, and you can just now harass, raid, and as long as you stay within the scope of that warrant.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I believe the magistrate judge, is that Bruce E. Reinhardt character? Is he the one who signed off on that, or is he just one of the judges?
He's the only one. There's not like a committee that it goes before. I mean, Judge Reinhardt is a magistrate district judge. He's in West Palm Beach, Florida, in the Southern District of Florida. The thing that a lot of people I don't think realize is that, like I said, the distinction there between a district court judge, that's where you have your trials in federal court. Then you obviously have your DC circuit, the 1st to 11th circuit, you appeal upward, and then the Supreme Court. Magistrate judges, though, are not subject to the same advice and consent role as district court judges to be appointed. So as we saw with the ACB hearings, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, we saw all these confirmation hearings. Well, that doesn't happen with magistrates. It happens with Supreme Court, circuit courts, district courts, but magistrate judges are appointed by this thing called a merit selection panel, which is comprised of 5 or 6 lawyers in that community or the locale where they'll serve, and 2 non-lawyers who then make a recommendation to the district court, and then the district court selects which magistrate judge is going to be put on the bench. So as you can see, in order for you to get on the bench, you have to have the nomination, but that nomination is placed in the hands of 5 to 6 lawyers, 2 non-citizens. You're looking at 7 or 8 people get to determine what judge is offered up to the district court. And unless there's a very blatant reason for them to not approve that merit selection panel nominee, you can just get right in and become a federal judge like that. And that's exactly what happened.
And you have, as a judge like that, you have the power to basically put a search warrant on somewhere where because with me, it's like if someone committed, like you said, like a heavy crime and it's proven, but just this idea that a congressman who has not even been charged with a crime yet can have his phone just basically stolen without lawyer representation. I guess that's technically legal, correct? If you're the judge that issues a warrant.
So, I mean, if they're seizing property and they have a valid search warrant, you're not under arrest. So your Miranda rights aren't implicated. You're not being charged with a crime. You're not being detained. They're seizing your property under a valid executed search warrant. And I say valid loosely, but the issue comes into contact where there's a lot of just decorum that operates between the government and lawyers, and especially in the criminal sense. A lot of times the government, if someone's going to plead guilty or they're going to arrange to go to jail when their sentence starts, the sheriff's office will call the defendant's attorney and be like, look, what are we going to do to set this up? Like, how do we want to arrange the, turning himself in and the transfer? They have this level of respect and just human decency, frankly, that sort of facilitate this happening. So it's not just like a railroad. But with here, not even notifying his attorney, obviously, based on the way that he's speaking, it seems as though he's done more than enough to place them on notice that he is represented and they have their contact information just based on the way he was speaking. But to seize a phone, and for what? I mean, what is it that they're going after? There's a lot of law. There's wealth of case law out there that show you cannot just go on a fishing expedition. There has to be a pointed direction or there's a pointed purpose for a search.
So I printed out this Newsweek report because, I guess they have some people inside the government that are kind of like, I don't know if it's a leak technically, but they're leaking information, even if it's not classified, about what's going on. So I'm just going to read that because they're saying that Trump has classified documents, or that's apparently. Newsweek has an exclusive. It says, an informer told the FBI what docs Trump was hiding and where. The raid on Mar-a-Lago was based largely on information from an FBI confidential human source, one who was able to identify what classified documents former President Trump was hiding, and even the location of those documents, 2 senior government officials told Newsweek. The officials who had direct knowledge of the FBI's deliberations and were granted anonymity, if I said that word right, in order to discuss sensitive matters, said the raid of Donald Trump's Florida residence was deliberately timed to occur when the former president was away. FBI decision makers in Washington and Miami thought that denying the former president a photo opportunity or a platform from which to grandstand or attempt to thwart the raid would lower the profile of the event, says one of the sources, a senior Justice Department official who was a 30-year veteran of the FBI said. So I'm going to read more of it, but it's like they thought that raiding him when he wasn't there was going to keep this low profile. Like, how did they think this was going to be low profile? I don't understand that.
Oh, they didn't. I mean, there, out of everything that you said, there might be a couple words that could strung together that may just touch on the line of being truthful. I mean, I want to know why you have a human informant. I would love to ask what gender it was and see if they're able to identify whether it was male or female, if they're going to make one up. The fact that they're saying, oh, it was going to be low profile. You're literally raiding Mar-a-Lago with dozens of FBI agents in broad daylight. I don't know what's worse I don't know if it's worse that they think we're dumb enough to actually buy these statements, or the fact that we have become so brainwashed and have lost any ability to use logical deduction or reasonable common sense principles, that they think that we're so dumb because we've demonstrated a pretty significant pattern of reducing our intellectual capabilities. I'll just leave it at that. But as a collective, they're just lying to our faces, and we eat it up every day. But it's nonsense.
And I'm going to keep this story going, but with the classified documents theory, they're saying that they had some sort of informant or someone that had knowledge of where the documents were. If that's the case, and it was like this clean-cut, low-profile execution, why in the world did they seize a congressman's phone if they knew exactly where the documents were? That's my question. To keep reading real quick, it says the effort to keep the raid low-key failed. Yeah, clearly. Instead, it prompted a furious response from GOP leaders and Trump supporters. What a spectacular backfire, says the justice official. So they're admitting it backfired. I know that there is much speculation out there that this is a political persecution, but it really is the best and the worst of the bureaucracy in action. They want to punctuate the fact that it was a routine law enforcement action stripped of any political overtones, and yet they got the exact opposite. Both senior government officials said the raid was scheduled with no political motive. The FBI's sole intent on recovering highly classified documents that were illegally moved from the White House. Preparations to conduct such an operation began weeks ago, but in planning the date and time, the FBI Miami field office and Washington headquarters were focused on the former president's scheduled return to Florida and his residency in New York and New Jersey. They were seeking to avoid any media circus, says the second source, a senior intelligence official who was briefed on the investigation and operation. So even though everything made sense bureaucratically and the FBI feared that the documents might be destroyed, they also created the very firestorm they sought to avoid in ignoring the fallout. So you have like mainstream government officials and intelligence guys admitting that it backfired spectacularly, which is like you said, it's like, I mean, do they think we're dumb? Are they dumb? Are they like you thought that you could just raid Mar-a-Lago and it was going to be a low profile event? And I guess my question is to you, like, I mean, as a citizen, lawyer, whatever, what do you like? Do you think he really had? I mean, I guess we'll find out. But did he have classified documents? Like, is that something that he would do, knowing how much they hate him?
Well, first, let me just unpack this for a second. The documents that they're after pertain to a National Archives issue that arrived. They're National Archives documents that were considered to be classified that were found back in February. Now, under the statute, it's 28 U.S.C. 1924, I believe, is a statute that specifically enumerates what constitutes that violation of possession or disclosure of unauthorized documents in an classified documents in an unauthorized location. Well, the first thing to nix in the bud, Mar-a-Lago is an authorized location, so it's over right there. But even if it weren't authorized, let's just say for the sake of argument that Mar-a-Lago wasn't an authorized location, which it is, the statute requires that you knowingly possess the documents with the intent to maintain them in an unauthorized location. So that means that Trump would have had to known he took those documents. He himself took those documents, otherwise there'd be a co-conspirator. But similar to on the opposite side of the spectrum, Epstein's the only person ever convicted of conspiracy without ever having a co-conspirator. But the issues of this, if Trump didn't bring the documents himself, which I highly doubt he did, then he didn't knowingly bring them. He would have directed someone else. That other person should then therefore be charged if the justice system is operating according to what they're saying he did, which again he didn't. And then also to maintain them with the intent to maintain them in an unauthorized location. Well, they were found in an authorized location. Secondly, the other issue is that when you execute a search warrant, even if it's a valid search warrant, let's take it out of the context of like rogue nature, corruption, things of that sort. Let's say that cops have everything lined up. They have everything that they need. Their ducks in a row. They get a very valid executed search warrant. Everything that was attested to is true. And then it's going to get like a gangbanger. They want to go get, they're looking for weapons, felony possession type thing. Well, when they go in that house, they can seize anything that they want. If they walk in the front door and there's a bong on the table and it's got residue, yeah, they can seize that. It's paraphernalia. It's in plain sight. That's an exception, actually, to the warrant requirement. Same thing with plain smell. That's how they can breathalyze you at DUI stops. But they opened the safe. So in order for you to check in a closed or concealed entity or thing within an area that you're searching, you have to have a reasonable basis or belief to believe that that paraphernalia or whatever it is that is the subject of your search is actually contained therein. So there would have to be a fact in the affidavit that was provided in support of that search warrant to attest as to the fact that they believed that those classified documents were being maintained in a safe. Because everything else that's been said so far, they were found in boxes in February, allegedly. We also don't know if they're still classified or not. Maybe they had classified written on it, but they've been declassified since. We don't really know because they don't want to give us the whole story. There were documents in boxes at Mar-a-Lago that said classified on it that were then seized, and now apparently it's a threat to national security. Meanwhile, Hunter's doing blow when we have a congressman on the left sleeping with Chinese spies.
Right.
It's asinine. The real reason that they're doing this is because they just did Watergate, but they didn't try to hide when they were trying to surreptitiously spy on a political campaign. They just went into Mar-a-Lago and went through everything that man has: personal, private, business, political, governmental, every entity they just went through, because they know that they don't have a snowball's chance in hell if they cannot cheat of winning in 2024. And the only way that they're going to try to get ahead of that game is by figuring out exactly what his plans are, and what better way to do it than to go raid his house yourself.
Right. I know through 2016 to 2019, watching how much they were pressing him on the Russia collusion, this and that, and everybody has flaws, everybody has sin. I was blown away because Trump is like a cool, swaggy guy that's been popular for 40, 50 years. He's a celebrity and an icon. But it's like the minimal stuff, if anything, they could find. Like they're like, Stormy, maybe someone slapped him on the butt with a magazine. And I'm like, this is the best you can get on this guy? He must be a really stand-up person because, if you dig into anybody's life, I'm sure you could find more than they found on him. So it seems like with all their failed attempts at calling him a Russian this and that they finally found their angle perhaps on a technicality, right, with a classified document that this is just my citizen opinion. Probably other presidents have done way more. I mean, we see people like, have they gone raids on everybody who knew Jeffrey Epstein? You know what I'm saying? And Ghislaine Maxwell, they don't seem that interested in finding the conspirators. But with Trump, it's like, I guess maybe they found a technicality angle and are just going scorched earth on him to just find whatever they can.
I mean, it comes down to this. People need to learn that there's a very big difference between Donald Trump and President Trump. One is a human being and a person that you can have your own subjective opinion as to whether you like him or not. The other one is more of an objective variable as to whether he is president and the executive director of a nation. He's the CEO of the United States, whether he did a good job leading this country while he was in office. Everyone's had, if they've played sports or a teacher in school, perhaps, when they were kids, there was a teacher or a coach that was a hard ass that rode you, that you just didn't like as a person. But you know what? I bet they were a damn good coach. And the point being is, just because you don't like someone personally doesn't mean that they're not capable or a good leader or good in their office. So bifurcating those two first is the first thing people need to realize. Secondly, is that if you can't see that every single industry is against him, it's been the media, it's been entertainment, it's now turned into sports, it's been every single broken fragment of society that they could categorize us into small clusters to turn at him. they're doing.
Right.
And that's for one reason and one reason only, which is that he is not part of the entire dark way and underbelly of the way that this world operates. And I mean, it's a scary truth, and a lot of people have cognitive dissonance over realizing the way that the world truly operates. Why isn't Hillary or why isn't Soros going down? They can't, because the entire world is built on corruption. The entire financial structure is on corruption. So you take that out, the entire foundation collapses of society. That's why they want to go after him. And there's going to be repercussions to pay, and they don't want to face the music.
I guess my next question is, do you think they'll be like, where do you see this going? Will they be successful in charging him? Or is it like, do you think they went too far and they overplayed their hand? Because I mean, this Newsweek article, it seems like there's government officials and intelligence guys that are like, yo, this, like, it seems like the tone of that article is like, yeah, that didn't go how we planned. So do you think they'll be successful, or do you think this is like a massive backfire that'll work in favor of Trump?
It's a psychological game where they're gaslighting. They're like, oh, that didn't work the way we planned, except it did. Because you got to go through everything that you wanted to go through. Once you have information, it's over. I mean, if there's something that's very sensitive information, if, like, for example, think about a football game, right? If you can read lips and you saw what the coach say was going to be the next play, you can be like, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have looked. I didn't realize that was against the rules. Well, bottom line is, you already know what they're going to do. You can't just take back knowledge or information once it's learned or transmitted. So that's why they're saying, oh, we're sorry, we shouldn't have done that. And people are going to be like, oh, see, now they're trying to hold themselves accountable. You can't say that they're these bad people anymore. Meanwhile, they're not holding themselves accountable. They knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted to get information on the campaign. And they had an open door view of literally everything that they wanted. And the safe issue, the reason I brought that up is because it's per se evidence that they were on a fishing expedition. There was no indication whatsoever that there were any classified documents in a safe. In fact, the safe was empty. So why are you violating the scope of a lawful search? I mean, you would have to get a second search warrant for the safe specifically. And when you go there, you literally would go there to get the safe, and that's it. You saw the same thing with the video of Project Veritas, how they went through James O'Keefe's entire home. They were looking for a physical object, allegedly, to try to find Ashley Biden's diary, and I guess perhaps it could be everywhere. But let's say they opened up a sunglass container it couldn't fit in there, so why are you looking in there? That's sort of the notion behind this.
Interesting.
So it's over once they look for the information.
So
Finally,
you think they're just using it as an excuse? Like, I mean, maybe they're interested in finding it, but yeah, like you said, why would you open something smaller if it wouldn't fit in there? Like, they're just, once they're in, they're basically just trying to find anything they can, which makes it seem a lot more targeted and political than, like, they have a vendetta against, right, essentially people who haven't committed crimes. That's the crazy part, right? James O'Keefe and Trump, they haven't been charged for anything. So it's, why are you doing that?
Well, of course not. I mean, they even went so far as to violating James's attorney-client privilege. They leaked privileged documents. I mean, this is the thing that I think a lot of people really are struggling with right now, which is that I genuinely believe that the vast majority of people overall are good people. But the problem is that because you're a good person, you naturally perceive that others are like you. So when someone does something wrong and veils it as a mistake or asks for forgiveness or an apology and says, oh, I won't do that or whatever, this whole turn the other cheek mentality takes over, because that's the grace that you'd want to receive. Because if you said that you did something on accident or it was a mistake or you didn't have a nefarious purpose or you didn't intend to be malicious, you would want that, as would everyone, because that's just understandable. People make mistakes. No one's perfect. We all sin. But the problem is that they use that and exploit the weakness of your morality. And you can't legislate or pass laws or statutes or policies with words to dictate what constitutes morality. It's something that's innate in humans. You're either a moral person, you're either a godly person, or you have values and respect and human decency, and you operate within those bounds, or you don't. Well, when the vast majority of people are operating within this bound, they're sort of like pigs in a pen, and you're running around frolicking in an entire field without restraint, of course you're going to do whatever you want to do. And people allow it to happen because we're so conflict averse, and we don't want to accept reality due to that whole cognitive dissonance concept, that no one wants to throw the first punch.
Right.
And it's trickling down.
Well, that's, I guess my next, it's going to be like a multi-part question, so feel free to take as long as you want. I guess my first part of the question is, will this successfully railroad Trump from running, or do you think it's going to give him superpowers and even more of like an icon status to win? And then also, like you said, that people are afraid to throw the first punch metaphorically. Like the Republican Party, this is kind of the narrative I've been pushing, and perhaps maybe too harsh for some, but I'm like, you guys had power for 4 years. You put in pharmacy lobbyists at the top of HHS. You appointed this FBI director. On one hand, I know that the swamp is deep and it's not easy. It's easier said than done. But it's like with Trump's kind of rhetoric, like he had a lot of the rhetoric of like lock her up, didn't do it. So now naturally, I think game theory wise, these people are like, well, you didn't lock us up. Now we're going to try to lock you up. So I guess my question is, do you think they'll successfully railroad Trump? Do you think it'll make him stronger? And like, do you think Republicans have learned their lesson to the point where they're finally actually going to do something if they get power?
Yes, I think he's going to run. No, I don't think Republicans are going to do anything about it, because I'll be honest with you. Politics is like dogfighting, except the people who are really in control are the ones that own both of the dogs in that fight. And neither one of them are fighting to make you money, but who's actually making you money is that marketing to sell tickets, and it's being advertised as a good fight. And the spectators are us. That's how politics operates. Republicans, Democrats, they're in theory as parties. I'm not saying the individual people that identify as being a Republican or Democrat. I also hate the fact I just said identify, because it sounds like I'm making up gender shit. But the notion of being a Republican or a Democrat is very binary. Naturally, there's only two options, but they're both just two wings of the same bird. I mean, how many times have we seen Republicans lose their spines? And I'm talking like traditional establishment type. It's all a game. They all profit off one another. I lived in DC for 6 years. My law firm is in DC. I see how they interact. I'm in the Capitol. I'm amongst lawmakers. A lot of them are friends. They're like best buddy. They'll go on and have they'll sit next to each other and just shit all over each other on Twitter. And it's funny because they're watching us. It's like dance monkey dance. They're seeing us just react.
Right.
Because they don't realize that we literally are in the middle of like a charade and we're just getting played. But then if you tell people this, you're the now subject of attack because of their insecurity that they've been lied to. It's like if you tell someone that there's something in their teeth at a restaurant, most people would appreciate that.
Right.
No, they get mad at you for attacking them for something that they put in their own tooth. It makes no sense.
So I think the average person watching this live stream, or let's just say above average, because obviously our audience is spectacular. We have almost 3,000 people here, by the way. People are probably watching being like, damn, so what do I do? This is a question I get a lot. And I know you do a lot with your legal firm. I do a lot with my media. What do people do, since obviously I think one side is the lesser of two evils, but they never seem to actually get anything done? Like, what's the solution for the average or above average person to combat this bipartisan tyranny?
Well, I mean, honestly, so like one of the things that I've been doing, I think I've done it for 4 months now, is I have so many cases going on right now that the number of people reaching out, I think I have over like 18,000 people that have reached out trying to seek representation. And I wish I could respond to everyone, but there's not enough lawyers that actually have balls to do the right thing anymore, or they're too focused on money and people are not in situations to afford it. So what I've done is, the first thing is create like a constitutional law class where I literally go through, I have like 400 pages of outlines, cases, case briefs. I have, daily, like it's at 8 p.m. on Tuesday nights. And I go through it in a 4-week segment. It's $100. I literally only just charge $100 for it. And I go through teaching you what the government is allowed to do, what the government is prohibited from doing, what the federal government can do, what the state government can do, what the states don't have the authority to regulate, what the federal government doesn't have the authority to regulate. And then I end it by going through your specific rights, Second Amendment rights. People don't understand that. People don't understand, how is it possible that there could be an argument in favor of legalizing abortion? Well, I'm as pro-life as it gets. I'm adopted. I was adopted at 2 days old. But I also can see, without taking the emotion out, where the argument rests in how abortion became legal. It's by and through the privacy right that comes out of the fundamental right of liberty. Can you have liberty without privacy? Yes or no? Ultimately breaks down to, well, if you can't regulate intimacy, it's the most sanctimonious and precious thing that there is in life. If you can't regulate the action, then how can you regulate the outcome? That's the logic and the string of how this goes through. But I do that course. The first thing people need to do is they can't do anything if they don't know their rights. So I've had so many people say, oh, I had to go get a letter from a pastor for my religious accommodation. No, you don't. That's not what the law says. You have to place them on notice of your sincerely held religious belief. And so long as they cannot demonstrate it causes an undue hardship, which is the burden of your employer, meaning either financial or infeasibility aspects for you to be able to actually carry out the duties of your job, they are obligated to give you an accommodation. You're not requesting an exemption, you're notifying them that you're entitled to an accommodation. But people don't know that, and then they fold. So learn your rights first. That's the number one thing.
I have a question from Patreon I'm going to ask, and before you answer that, I want to ask like what your legal wins have been, so you could tell people some of the wins you've had in the last couple of years with medical tyranny. But this is Trevor at patreon.com/raretalk. By the way, guys, I have hundreds of people on here, and only one person asked a question. I asked yesterday, I said, anybody have a question for a lawyer? I'm going to get it, and only Trevor did it. So Trevor, thank you for being the one person who actually paid attention. You get rewarded. He said, what I'd like to know from your lawyer friend is how, if how we can sue the state for economic damages imposed by their lockdowns, as well as for the discrimination they've tried to make us enforce as business owners, along with discrimination we've experienced for being unjabbed. Is there a way to penalize the state for infringing on the same rights they claim to believe with Roe versus Wade? It's my body, my choice, and I do have the right to privacy surrounding my medical decisions. So,
extremely good question. I wish there was a more direct answer to this, but the issue between the state and a private employer, let me just go into, I'll talk about it in the private employer context because it takes the immunity issue out. So if you have a private employer that terminated you because you submitted a religious accommodation that they wrongfully denied and they can't satisfy that burden of demonstrating an undue hardship, you can sue over that. We are suing that. There was just a $10.3 million settlement against a hospital in Chicago in a class action because they fired 520 workers who were unvaccinated that submitted valid religious accommodation requests. We have other cases going on right now, and when I say we, there's a collective group of about 29 lawyers that have stuck together since day one, really. I mean, I won't say day one of the administration, but day one being when the executive orders came out on September 9th last year. Us 29 lawyers have taken on the entire federal government, and we literally continue kicking their ass. Collectively as a group, no more masks on airplanes, vaccine mandate for federal workers blocked, which was the federal vaccine mandate. I was the one that blocked that for religious accommodations, in my case, Church v. Biden. I also have another case currently where I'm putting pressure on the government as 2 days to respond as to why two of my Marine clients have been attempted to be discharged, one of which I have maintained staying in the service. The other one was formally discharged, which will reignite that lawsuit, and hopefully I'll get a nationwide injunction for Marines next. Great work by Liberty Counsel, who I'm working with on, and again, we're a big group. Liberty Counsel did the Navy mandate. They also did the Air Force mandate. We got the mass off airplanes. OSHA mandate was blocked for private sector. I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming down, and that's not even the tip of it. I'm also very involved in the schools and stuff. But in terms of what you can do against the government or the state or whatever that employer is for discrimination, you have to file a charge that goes through the EEOC, and there's also a lot of prerequisites. I don't want to get into like the specific litigious part of it because it's long and drawn out, but you have a right of bringing a claim. The issue with the government is that they have higher levels of immunity. They have qualified immunity in a lot of ways, or they could be absolutely immune. It depends on the context. Right now I'm representing the city of Los Angeles firefighters, and I'm going to be suing. I'm sure they'll listen to this. I'm suing you if you are. Suing the city of LA and Garcetti for the vaccine mandate in LA. And we're going to block that. So, you can fight back, but you just have to, individually, you need to exhaust your administrative remedies. Write that keyword down, exhaust administrative remedies. And then the next thing is that you want to contact a lawyer at the earliest possible chance you get, because there's a lot of little nuances. I also have a workshop on doing EEOC claims too. So just for the record for people.
I guess one of my last questions is, well, actually before that, I am kind of curious. I know that the vaccines, the Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, they have this liability shield under the PrEP Act, the PrEP Act, where they don't have liability for their side effects and adverse events, etc. And I know that there's some sort of like, gray area as to when it expires and if it can be like revamped. What do you know about the PrEP Act? I remember you talking about that when I saw you a month ago, but I didn't get the full answer. Is it going to expire? Are they going to eventually have to take liability for side effects, or are they able to just continuously kind of pump this out forever and shield themselves from liability?
All right. So actually, I was not expecting you to ask me this question, but this is the first time I'm going to make this information public because it's being buried by media. And frankly, I've been holding it because I've been building a network out with this. But no, the PrEP Act is not a iron curtain that defends big pharma, and they are going to be sued for vaccine injuries. It is not this guaranteed veil of immunity. You can sue pharmaceutical manufacturers, you can sue providers, you can sue employers, you can sue physicians, you can sue doctors, you can sue the distributor. Anyone that's in the chain of this defective product can be sued under a strict liability theory, but also the most important component of it, and I guess let me strike that, depends on the state, because the issue with the PrEP Act is that it specifically preempts meaning it applies to claims, quote, in federal court. So what does that mean? Logically, keep it out of federal court, keep it in state court. Those are the only two options, state court and federal court. So to file it in state court, the way that this works is that you sue only based on state law claims. So you have to realize there's two different, like, how there's like Mac and PC. You have a computer is law, but you have Mac and you have PC. PC is state law, Mac is federal law. They don't work together. Sometimes they do coincide on certain things, but they're not the same operating system. State laws are such as negligence, wrongful death, elder abuse, medical malpractice. Those things are state law claims. In order to have a case in federal court, there's only two ways. One is if you're raising a federal question, meaning you're suing under a federal statute or you're suing for a federal law, or there's a state law claim that has an integral federal element, meaning you're suing for discrimination under the California Fair Housing and Employment Act, and that's essential and falls within the anti-discrimination laws of the Civil Rights Act. None of the state law claims that you sue under, you sue and keep it in state court. If you do that, they can file a notice of removal, go up to federal court. They don't need permission, they can take it. But then you have the right to remand it and say, you file a motion saying, Your Honor, to the federal judge, this case has no jurisdiction to be here. It's not a federal question case under 1331. It's not here on diversity jurisdiction, which means that both parties are completely diverse, that there's not a same state of residence of the corporations on the defendant side or the plaintiff side. They don't share the same state of residence or incorporation, PPB. So as long as you're suing a company that is incorporated and exists and operates within the same state that you live, they cannot remove it because there's no diversity. So if it's 75K or more state law claim, you can go federal court, like bad car accident.
So there will be challenges to the PrEP Act. I mean, there will be some sort of legal battles over it.
It's already been affirmed in the Ninth Circuit. The argument I just laid out has been affirmed per curiam in the Ninth Circuit already. Okay. People don't know that yet, but
I got you.
This is going to give us landfall of litigation.
It's huge. Someone did a super chat, so I'm going to honor their, bribing, no, lack of a better word, but thank you for the $20 super chat. They said, do you know anything about the legality of Trump's Schedule F plan if elected again? Could this be why the raids are happening? I don't know what Schedule F is. I'm not sure if you do.
I have no idea, and I'm absolutely okay with telling people that there's things that I don't know, and this is one of them.
It could be like a literal thing, or it could be like a theory. I don't know what the person means. Like it's like, Schedule G, and I don't know. It could be either one. So, any last thing, I guess, before we wrap it up, I want to keep this like under 45 minutes, I think, because it's been awesome, and I know it's going to be very shareable and watchable. I guess outside of the litigation, you're doing a lot of people are fighting back. Like, how do voters, where it's like, okay, we see it's the lesser of two evils, but we see that, like you said, a lot of these people are just friends and texting next to each other, but they're pretending like they hate each other. Like, how do we hold our politicians accountable and make sure that they trend in the right direction and perhaps maybe one day start doing something for us?
Well, first thing, start thinking for yourself. Stop falling victim into this culture of being in groups of friends or around people that make you think differently or feel as though you can't speak your mind, because being silenced is the biggest threat that there is people not freely thinking. People should be able to agree to disagree and just do so respectfully. But do your research. Stop being lazy. People are so lazy. They just want to get things told to them. They'll read headlines of articles and think that they know something that happened. Or I see it all the time on social media. They'll literally comment on the post and ask the person who posted it if it's real. Like, oh, now you caught me. I'm going to lie to you and tell you, oh, you got me. No, it's fake. What do you like? That's going to be your bolstering of, backing the fact it's true. Research yourself, make up your own mind, and for God's sakes, vote. I've seen so many elections where there's sub 25% of the state population voted. California has more registered Republicans than any other state. I'm not saying it's a red state. I mean, I think it's a lot more red than people realize. But hell, if Republicans actually went and voted, it would have a big outcome. But people thinking that their one vote doesn't matter, don't think about it as to I'm only going to do things if it's going to make a difference. Do it for yourself. You're an American. You have a right to vote. People have literally died for that right. So go exercise it. Like, honor those people. Instead of thinking about the future, what's going to have the effect later, do it as something you're holding yourself accountable to for the hundreds of thousands, if not, million plus soldiers that have died. So you have that right. The other thing is, if you want to get educated, again, I'm not trying to put a shameless plug in here, but I genuinely do try to help people. I have free templates I give out. I put information on my Instagram all the time, Yoder_ESQ. And my website is yoderesq.com. You can click on the workshops tab there, sign up for that con law workshop. I have had 4 different classes. I usually cap out at like 200 people a class, and that's what I max it out at. It fills up like a day or two. And I give them all these resources. And then also the last day is a live Q&A where I will sit there for 5 hours if I have to, answering every single person's individualized questions, because you guys can't get answers. And I feel terrible. People can't get answers, but that's what you need to do, is be your own person, think for yourself, base it off of accurate information that you yourself found and read and saw with your own eyes, and then vote with that information. That's how you make the difference. And then in the meantime, I'm doing everything I can to offer resources to help you protect yourself as you're trying to just live. I mean, you have to protect yourself to live in the society we now live in, but you also don't even know what you're supposed to be doing while you're here. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I'm going to squeeze this in real quick because I guess a lot of people were saying Schedule F is like Trump's alleged, like maybe the name of the plan where he said he's going to like fire a bunch of federal employees. And I've seen the news reports like saying if Trump's back in, he's going to fire a bunch of federal employees. Do you think he will do that? And I guess do you think, because that's my little thing with my audience where I'm like, I've seen a lot of stuff Trump did, a lot of good, a lot of bad. Things were tough. He learned a lot. He's new to the game. But he put a pharmacy lobbyist at the head of HHS, and I feel like that was disastrous. I don't know what his plans are for the future, but do you think he really will do that or no? Like, if he gets in, do you think he'll really try to clean house and quote unquote drain the swamp, or you think it's harder to do or something?
I mean, it's definitely a lot harder to do than people think it is. It's not like you can just go in and say you're fired. It's not The Apprentice. It's the federal government. And people just seem to reduce it down to being that simple. I think that he's going to do what he can do. I mean, look, the one thing that's always stayed constant is he's put the best interest of America first. The method or the means by which he goes about facilitating that, I don't know. I don't know all the variables that are at play. I think that there's going to be a lot of terminations. I'd like to see criminal charges. Hell, I'd like to see Hillary Clinton in handcuffs and in a jail cell. And I'm Fauci, and I'm not going to say anything else about, I said jail. I'll stop at jail cell, but you guys get the point. The way that he acts, I don't know what he's going to do, but that shouldn't be our focus right now, is wondering what Trump's going to do. Live in the moment, protect yourself, facilitate day to day. Stop speculating, living your life looking into a magic 8 ball that has answers that you may never know about that come to fruition, because it's impossible to know what he's going to do. So focus on what you can do. That's the first thing. But I'd love to see it. I'd love to see him fired. I think our entire federal government needs to be substantially gutted. We waste so much money. I think the DOJ needs to be rooted inside out. The FBI needs to be disbanded and rebuilt. I think our military our veterans deserve the biggest apology in the world. That's the first thing I hope he does, is reinstate every veteran that was dishonorably or honorably discharged from our service over these vaccine mandates. That's the first thing I think that he should do. And from there, things can look up.
Right. Thanks so much for joining Mike. His name is Mike Yoder. Check him out on all his social media. And thank you everybody at patreon.com/raretalk. I appreciate you guys. And when I have guests on, I'm going to ask for questions there. Trevor was one of a couple hundred people who was, I guess, awake and, using Patreon at the time. So he got his question answered, but we'll do more stuff like this and secret podcasts there in the future. Thank you to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, everything. Appreciate you guys. And I'll be back soon. Check his stuff out, and he does a lot of great work legally. Appreciate you, Mike.
Yep, thanks for having me on.